Some Canadians believe that the Conservative Party of Canada and Pierre Poilievre could save this country if they only get voted in. Personally, I think that the Conservative Party could end up being our worst nightmare. After all, it was Stephen Harper in 2015 that signed up Canada to the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda. In the Netherlands, for example, there's a crisis happening where farmers are under attack along with their way of life. And is this government in the Netherlands, is it a far left communist party doing this? No, it's being implemented by the Dutch center-right so-called Conservative Party. Their name is the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy. The so-called conservative parties that claim they are fighting for us could end up being our worst nightmare. Tonight, we investigate what's happening in the Netherlands, and the conversation starts now.
I promise you, I will not let you down.
The trucks parked outside illegally should move.
Canada's Conservatives will meet our Paris climate commitment.
Enough with the woke. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I take that back.
To champion our conservative principles.
We are the party of law and order.
To call in the auditors. We haven't yet decided whether we're going to call for the government to impose a mandatory test or vaccination.
And we will win the next election. Canada must not ignore the reality of climate change.
Why weren't Canadians vaccinated in January and February like everyone else?
Welcome, everybody, to Controlled Opposition, episode 18. I'm your host, Greg Wycliffe, and with me tonight is a very special guest. He is a PPC candidate from Markham-Stouffville. He is an environmentalist consultant for over 35 years here in Canada, and you're also the grandson of a Dutch farmer, the one and only, the Dutchman himself, René de Vries. How are you doing this evening,
Yes,
sir?
Hi, Greg. Thanks for inviting me here. I'm doing great. I also brought a picture to show that I'm really a grandson.
Is that photographic evidence of
I
your
have
Dutch,
evidence.
of
Yes,
your
I
Dutch
brought the
grandfather?
receipts.
It's your Dutch
That's my
grandfather.
and that's me with blonde hair on top of the.
Right. No, zoom it right in
horse.
on the camera. Zoom it right in. I want to see that. Can you put it up to the camera?
Oh, can you see?
Yeah. Just move it.
Go closer.
Yeah.
Whoa.
That's you on the horse there.
That's me.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well,
So thanks for inviting me. It's great to talk about this. It's quite timely and I've been living this all my life. I moved here when I was 21 to Canada. I've been working here in environmental consulting for 35 years now. So.
Amazing. So tonight we are going to talk about what's happening in the Netherlands with the farmers. It was kind of sort of inspired by the Trucker Convoy protest. We'll go over that. We'll go over the sort of, official center-right Conservative Party and what they're doing, because there's a lot of parallels between what they're doing and saying and what the Conservative Party here is doing and saying. And of course, we'll talk about some solutions, some hope with the populist parties that have been springing up and changing the game over the Netherlands. And hopefully you can fill in the blanks there and the parallels. But first and foremost, let's get into it. I want to know, Mr. René, you've ran as a PPC candidate, and I'm curious, how did you first kind of get into politics, and when did you kind of first wake up to the idea of controlled opposition, or the idea that, hey, this Conservative Party, I don't know if they're actually here to help us?
Well, I've always had the ambition to get into politics at the end of my business career, and I've been already throughout my career meeting a lot of people that way. I've met Trudeau and Prime Minister Rutte as part of that engagement. I've also even met Mikhail Gorbachev. I thought might come in handy at some point. So I always had this idea, but then in 2020-21, when this whole COVID bamboozle happened, I thought it was perfect time to get involved. And how did I get involved? I ran into Max Bernier actually at the various demonstrations, anti-lockdown demonstrations, and I really developed an affinity there. I also felt my lion spirit getting all fed through the demonstrations. Randy Hillier and Maxime Bernier were there as political people. And I thought, okay, let's put my hat in the ring. In May 21, I decided to do that and become a candidate. And the rest is history. I had 3.5% of the vote here in Stouffville.
Nice,
but
not bad.
One thing that I wanted to say, I was already somewhat involved here in Stouffville in politics. I supported Jane Philpott as she was in 2015, a liberal. She's a good lady. She's a doctor. She went to my church, and she was a bit of a rebel too. Now, she didn't last too long in the Trudeau cabinet, as you know. But I supported her because I didn't like the conservative here, Paul Calandra. I thought he was definitely controlled the opposition, a bit of a showman and a salesman for the military-industrial complex, as I felt he was. At that time, Syria was playing a lot, and they wanted to start World War III. They still want to start World War III. But he was fully behind that, and I felt that deserved some pushback. And we had a peace festival here in Stouffville with the support also of Jane Philpott and a lot of others. That's how it started.
Yeah. Did Jane Philpott get back in 2021?
No. She tried to run as an independent, and she lost against Helena Jacek, who's a liberal, who had the machine behind her, and who defeated her.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's get into this farmers protest. I'll just bring up this. This is a familiar site. I put it up on the intro, but we had a whole bunch of tractors coming down the freeway, people cheering on the overpass. Obviously, that very reminiscent of the Trucker Convoy. And I was doing the research today, and of course, if I'm not mistaken, it was February 2022. That's when the Trucker Convoy happened, and then this big uprising, this kind of activation happened in the Netherlands in June, July, the summer of 2022. However, like many protests that go on, if I'm not mistaken, this was kind of like a sentiment back in 2019 as well, that farmers were upset.
Yeah, this has been building for decades, I would say. Okay, this is nothing new. The populist parties in the Netherlands have a history of at least 20 years. Now, the farmers, their big discontent started, I think, around this whole introduction of nitrogen rules, which they felt was total nonsense. And they felt, you're trying to hoax us here. Now, a common sense farmer doesn't like hoaxes, right? They don't mind making even compromises, even related to their business. They've always had to do things very environmentally friendly because the country's so densely populated. They have to make sure that the shit doesn't stink too much for the neighbor, so to speak. There's all sorts of rules that they need to live by in order to make farming work. Now, this rule was imposed, and I think what happened was that people, thought, okay, this is too much of a hoax. This is not even reality. And under false pretenses, you're trying to confiscate our farms. And then 2, that started to tie into other political resistance, like against the World Economic Forum rules. And that came on the heels also of the whole COVID bamboozle, which I believe actually that farmers protest was also another buildup of the Canadian truckers protest, where they saw, okay, actually what we've been doing already for decades maybe makes sense here again too. Let's ramp it up a notch, and that's what they did. So I do think there is a connection between Canada and Holland there. They felt inspired by the truckers protest here, and so that is now going back and forth. And I'm hoping actually that now this latest wave of political discontent that they were able to translate to political power in the House of Commons there also will translate now here.
Okay, I was going to bring this up a little bit later, but let's bring it up now. This is one of the official, conservative parties. It's called the People's Party for Freedom and Democracy. And would you say this is an apt comparison? They've been around for so long. They're kind of like the grandfathered, if you will, conservative party. Like they've been around for since the...
for more than decades. Yeah, look at that. Since after the war, they were started, and they've always been part of often been part of the coalition government in the Netherlands. Netherlands usually.
So I was going to say, my question was, as this sort of has been building with these farmers, this kind of resentment, this kind of like, we think this is nonsense, what you're imposing upon us. What was this party doing during that time Like, were they kind of just placating the farmers? Were they actually doing anything for the farmers, or has it kind of been a slow march with more and more?
It's been a slow boiling frog situation. Also, I think for the people in this party, and some party have actually separated from this party, started a new populist party like Geert Wilbers, who runs the PVV, another Freedom Party, came from the VVD and left them because he felt that they were not standing up for the Dutch farmers and the entrepreneurs. And so that VVD has always been very much a business-oriented party, like the conservatives here. But over time, they became more and more drawn into this Euro-centered thinking. I think Klaus Schwab has had a big influence on Mark Rutte as well, at least the thinking of that, the whole sustainability agenda. They definitely drank all the Kool-Aid from the World Economic Forum. And so that's slowly how they drifted towards a super duper environmental, almost a green fascism, as you could call it, agenda that was already advocated by the Green Party in the Netherlands or their coalition party DSS. And so there's I think it's a slow boiling frog situation.
Yeah, and I'm just going to play a quick clip here of the farmers kind of roaming around in their protest, just to kind of, embodying that spirit of the convoy and using their trucks or their tractors to really kind of make some moves here.
Yeah, that was last summer when they started some fires. They've been slowly ramping.
Andere kant op, andere kant zo. Allemaal die kant op, voor je eigen veiligheid.
So tell me, that those fires was like an escalation from the farmers, right? And
Yeah.
what exactly were they doing there? And really, what did that protest accomplish? Because we can say in Canada that the convoy helped to turn the tides on the mandates. Those kind of started to kind of turn around slowly but surely. What came of this farmers' protest last summer?
At one point, the coalition government led by VVD appointed a mediator and said, okay, we need to come up with a solution that is supported by both the farmers and by the government. And the farmers said, no, the mediator that you've appointed is not acceptable to us. And they broke every discussion off, and they said, we are really unhappy with the fundamentals of your proposal because you try to negotiate something now to the middle, and we don't agree with your starting position of confiscating 3,000 farms. And so that's that. At that point, they said, okay, we obviously you don't hear us. You don't think that we're serious. Let's escalate the protest somewhere. And that's what they did. And then they also added the fires because then you can, they wound up basically blocking major highways off. And that definitely got more attention. They also briefly blocked distribution center for food. So, yeah, they wanted to get people's attention and say, enough is enough. That's basically, so right. It was really, in that sense, comparable to what the truckers did and say, okay, we want your attention and we want to talk to you. And the way you've been positioning yourself is not acceptable to us. And so it's definitely breaking off all negotiations. It's a bit of a war footing, right? And who's stronger there? Well, that's the question. Now,
And when it comes to the VVD, they presented kind of a negotiation mediator, as you called it. And what was their sort of excuse? Because it sounds like they weren't giving them any sort of anything that they wanted, that the farmers wanted. What was the VVD's excuse for, like, well, we still need to confiscate the 3,000 farms. We still need to do this. What was their reasoning? Was it just like World Economic Forum, SDG, kind of like, environmental BS or what?
Yeah, I would call it, and as an environmental guy, I guess I can judge it fairly well. I would call it environmental BS. They used the environment as a reason, but if you look at it underneath, the argument of nitrogen was abused from a scientific perspective. It wouldn't make sense, and the farmers would actually even produce scientific reports showing that, and said, well, you're bamboozling us. You're doing this because you need our land for additional solar panels or for more housing. a big housing shortage with all the migrants and people coming to the Netherlands. And so they said, you're not being honest. You're not negotiating in good faith. That's really what did it in the end. And how and so they haven't resolved that whole situation really.
Right.
So it's almost like they're on two different planets. The one party says, well, we're doing this for the common good, for the environment. The other says, nah, bullshit. You're not. That argument doesn't even make any sense. Same thing as we see with climate change. Right?
Yeah. It sounds very familiar, and it all comes back to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, where these politicians, these globalists, give all these reasons that sound so fluffy and sound so amazing, whether it's climate change, environmentalism, stopping racism, stopping hatred, stopping poverty. They have all the nice fluffy language. But when it comes down to the application, the farmers who are of the land and are probably some of the most practical, hardworking people imaginable, they're like, this doesn't make sense. Go F yourselves. And for those who don't know, correct me if I'm wrong here, René, the Netherlands is responsible. It's like the second largest exporter of food in the world.
Yeah, that's right. 100 billion a year they export. It's after the United States, the largest exporter of food.
Right. Now, so if you're an evil globalist who wants to, disrupt our way of life around the planet, then obviously going after the Netherlands, one of the number 2 maker of food worldwide, is obviously a good kind of like top of your priority list. If you were an evil globalist, so to speak. But I wanted to play. This is a really good clip that you sent to me of the book. So this is
this is funny.
So this is sorry, I'll just bring this up for a second. So this right here is Mark Rutte. How do you say it?
Yeah, Mark Rutte. And he is the leader of the VVD. So once again, this is the center-right, so-called conservative party leader. And this clip here is basically somebody calling him out. Who's the guy calling him out? He is Gideon van Meijeren. He's one of the elected parliament members of a equivalent to a PPC in the Netherlands. So it's called the Forum for Democracy.
Great. So he's asking the leader of this so-called conservative party about the Klaus Schwab book, COVID-19, The Great Reset. Take a watch. Yeah. I apologize. There's going to be reading, so make sure you read along with the subtitles. Okay.
De eerste is de heer Klaus Schwab, oprichter en voorzitter van het World Economic Forum. En hij heeft ook een boek geschreven met als pakkende titel COVID-19, The Great Reset. En mijn vraag aan de demissionair minister-president is: hoe beoordeelt hij de inhoud van dit boek?
De minister-president.
Ik ken het boek niet, voorzitter. Maar ik zou de heer Van Meijeren willen adviseren om niet al te veel in al die conspiracy-theorieën. Ik kijk ze ook allemaal op YouTube. Ik vind het altijd fascinerend hoe dan uitgelegd wordt dat 9/11 niet heeft plaatsgevonden of dat het allemaal anders zit. Ontzettend knap in elkaar gezet. Maar het is meestal wat het is, een conspiracy-theorie.
De heer Van Meijeren.
Nou, het verbaast mij dat de eerste vraag die ik aan de heer Rutte stel sinds ik beëdigd ben als Kamerlid direct wordt beantwoord. Dank u wel, maar het verbaast mij dat die eerste vraag direct wordt beantwoord met een leugen. Ik heb namelijk een brief in mijn hand die dateert van 26 november 2020. En dat is een brief van de heer Rutte aan de heer Klaus Schwab, waarin hij de heer Schwab bedankt voor het toezenden van zijn boek. En dit noemt een hoopvolle analyse voor een betere toekomst. Zou de heer Rutte nog even kunnen graven in zijn geheugen? Het is nog geen half jaar geleden, dus ik weet niet hoe lang uw herinneringen actief blijven. Maar waarschijnlijk is dit nog wel ergens op te graven. En mijn eerste vraag opnieuw te beantwoorden en nu eerlijk, alstublieft.
Nou, het eerlijke antwoord is dat dat een nette brief is. Waarin je helaas niet alle boeken die je toegestuurd krijgt van kaft tot kaft kunt lezen. Maar wel degene die je toestuurt een vriendelijke brief wil terugsturen.
Nou, dan zegt de heer Rutte dus eigenlijk dat hij niet heeft gelogen tegen mij, maar tegen de heer Klaus Schwab. Maar laat ik dan hier direct alsnog de vraag stellen. De heer Klaus Schwab die pleit in zijn boek voor het resetten van onze wereld, om onze nationale parlementaire democratie te vervangen door een globale technocratie. Hij pleit ervoor dat er een einde komt aan privébezit. En de heer Rutte is er kennelijk niet eens van bewust dat hij dit een hoopvolle boodschap voor een betere toekomst heeft genoemd. Hoe is het mogelijk dat de heer Rutte een waardeoordeel hecht aan een boek met een neocommunistische boodschap, terwijl hij dat boek niet eens gelezen heeft?
Dank u wel. De minister-president.
I mean, all that just sounds and looks so familiar. You know, some politician being like, "I have no idea what
it's
you're
a conspiracy theory."
Oh, it was the Communist Manifesto. I had no idea. I had nothing to do. What? And I'm sure there's probably a lot more clips like this. I'm pretty sure there was a clip of what's his face with Klaus Schwab shaking his hand and you know, breaking bread and that sort of thing. How strong of a pattern is this? Is every single member of the VVD kind of you know, speaking out both sides of their mouth, so to speak, like we see?
Listen, I got to remind you that the Bilderberg Group started in the Netherlands in 1954. So now they're. Did you know that it's just starting now in Lisbon? Bilderberg Group, they're meeting again. Freeland is there. Mark Carney is there. And Prince Bernhard, who was the prince or the king married to the queen in the Netherlands, started that whole club. And so, this discussion has been going on forever, right? So behind the scenes, the little club that we're not part of, according to George Carling, has been making policy behind the scenes. And the interesting thing in the last 20 years, I think, is mainly because of the internet, we're much more aware of it. So we're now not just taking it, just lying down anymore.
Yeah. And the thing is, this Mark, you said Mark Rutte, is that how you say it?
Rutte, yeah.
Rutte.
Rutte. I met him in 2018 in Ottawa. Yeah, that was interesting.
And the thing is like, let's face it, he's a good-looking guy. He's charming. You know, he's a perfect sort of globalist little sort of puppet, so to speak. What kind of breadcrumbs? Because I would make the argument that someone like Justin Trudeau uses his.
Klaus Schwab.
Someone like Justin Trudeau uses his, like, you know, sex appeal and his charm to kind of charm his followers and that sort of thing. What would you say? And also Pierre Poilievre does we got to get Trudeau out. Money, money, money. We're going to save you money. That's kind of like his charm. What would you say it is for Mark Rutte? What is his kind of thing? What kind of breadcrumbs does he feed the Dutch populace to kind of be like, no, it's okay. It's okay.
Well, the Dutch have always had a very common sense approach to things. One of my favorite Dutch sayings is just act normal, you're crazy enough. You know, so he's representative of trying to bring everybody together, and he always has good stories that way. And now supposedly the story about, well, yeah, I'm sorry, we have to do this because we're just creating too much pollution. Same as actually Justin Trudeau is saying, right? Like with the pollution of the cars, the CO2. It's a similar sort of thinking and talking. And it sounds reasonable at the surface. Nobody wants to have pollution in their face. Nobody wants to. But right. Once you start to dig deeper into it, you realize that CO2 is not a pollutant. It's in fact a plant food. That nitrogen is also a necessary element for plants. And to use that as an argument for is not fair on its surface. It's not using truth. And they're creating fictions in the context of just a policy that they want to implement. And that's just part of the whole globalist agenda. And it started in 1974 in Club of Rome, right? The elites decided that we're going to use the environment as a way of, as a new enemy that we can rally the whole world around.
Right. And so let's look for more parallels here, because there are certainly a lot when it comes to the Trucker Convoy. When it comes to political dissidents who have been, you know, one of the regular co-hosts here is Jeremy McKenzie. He's a very outspoken individual, and he has really been picked on by the state media, the state government, the state intelligence agencies, and on and on. And the Conservative Party, the official opposition in this country, vilify anybody like this. They vilify any dissident. They vilify any dissent. Is the same thing happening in the Netherlands, where these farmers are terrorists and they're these evil people? What does that look like, and what does that sound like, and who does it come from?
Well, it is the what you would call then what is supposed to be the acceptable way of dealing with the situation, and that's represented by someone like Mark Rutte that says, well, this is what we have to do, and then people that agitate against it say, no, we don't have to do this, and what you're trying to propose doesn't make sense. They get marginalized, you know, and they get basically pushed aside, and to the point of, and I'll give you one example. For 20 years, they already have had populist parties, okay, agitating against this type of agenda in the Netherlands. One guy that rose to prominence was killed at one point, okay? That's a political assassination, very rare in the Netherlands. I think the last time was William of Orange was in the 1600s, where they had an assassination. Now, this was Pim Fortuyn. He was a guy that was standing up against all the refugees coming in the Netherlands. Basically, he said, Netherlands is full. We shouldn't be changing our way of life here and just flood the whole country with migrants. And he was killed actually by a radical environmentalist. Good thing he wasn't killed by somebody from another ethnic background, because the Dutch would have at that point started a civil war probably. But so this has been going on for 20 years now. The farmers,
and was it a straight up like assassination? Like it was like a straight up terroristic, like, very intentional?
He walked out of an interview with a radio station. One guy, it was just one guy. So another lone assassin. There's no conspiracy theories about him belonging to some sort of larger thing that they were after him. But maybe
it was Stephen Guilbeault's friend. Sorry, I brought that up last week, so I thought I'd call back.
Yeah. Or he was friends with Kennedy's killer, right?
Who knows? They're all just MK Ultra programmed assassin robots. Who knows? But when did this happen again?
This was early 2000s, 2005, I think, or
interesting,
something like that. Pim Fortuyn, look him up. Yeah, he was a very interesting guy, very smart, very much agitating against this World Economic Forum, this kind of agenda, and he was in Parliament with a fairly large party, 16 at one point seats, agitating against this, but he was snuffed out. So, and then other parties rose, including the one that you saw Gideon van Meyer talk. They landed in the House of Commons with 8 seats in 21, and now the Farmers' Party stood up. And in 21, the current leader, Caroline van der Plas, she was elected as a sole representative. Because you have proportional representation in the Netherlands, these changes go a lot faster than they would go here in Canada. We can talk about that a bit later, how the PPC can operate here. But now suddenly, because and it shows a very good sign. The population has chosen the side of the farmers. Okay, and in the latest election, it was in March of this year, they became this Farmers' Party under the lead of Caroline van der Plas, became the biggest party in a provincial election. Now, this is not for the House of Commons. This 2 years from now, the House of Commons election will be had. If she is still in the same position as she is now, she will be the next Prime Minister of the Netherlands and displace Mark Rutte. So that will be interesting. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys can quite see that, but essentially at the top here you have BBB. This is the new Farmers' Party getting, what is that, 1,590, is that seats in different provinces? Or
that number, I'm not sure what that is. That 15 is seats, yeah. This was the election for provincial Raad van State, it's called, and they elected the Senate, and they only have 75 seats there, so they became the biggest party. Yeah, right. That's it.
And then, as you can see it here, it's the farmer citizen movement in the Netherlands being just growing like crazy. And this is the the leader, you said, is
Caroline van der Plas.
Van der Plas right here.
Yeah.
Okay. And is there any kind of evidence of like subversion in the BBB? Like, are they going to be? Are they actually our saviors? Or are there any kind of
there always is?
Yeah.
There always is. Yeah. Actually, the biggest, and usually these parties they wind up destroying themselves from within. Like Pim Fortuyn was the same way. They couldn't find enough people that represented them in a good way, or you had some people join them that just couldn't keep the story together. And at the moment, even though they have had such an electoral success, they have a hard time finding good candidates that can actually work in the various government agencies to implement their policy. So now is this going to be successful? What happened with the Forum for Democracy in 21? These people could not work with anybody, and the establishment parties didn't want to form coalition parties with these new upstart populist parties. So their policies were defeated that way. So even though you might get elected in parliament, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to implement your policies.
I guess it's a little different there because there is so many different parties. How would you how many parties would you say?
20.
20 are,
and there's only 150 seats. So imagine that. Yeah. So they have a government with 4 parties represented. That's a coalition government. But what the good news is, and that's very encouraging for us also in Canada, the populist discontent is so strong there that they overpowered everything. They gave the establishment parties a drubbing. Some of them dropped by 50% in their support. Imagine that, right? Well, we've seen it here in Canada too, where suddenly the Conservative Party loses all their seats, and boom, it's possible. But will they be decimated? That's the whole question, and then replaced by another party. That's here because you have this first past the post system. I find the control is much more there. It's almost flips from red to blue. And it's almost like, okay, it's a fixed game to begin with, because your new voice is very hard to get in there. But we'll see.
How would you say, because something that I feel we're fighting here in Canada is the apathy, is this sort of demoralization of so many Canadians not even caring, not even following the politics that's happening in their own country. But I feel like the history of the Netherlands is a little bit different. You guys are a little bit more animated. There's kind of a history of there being kind of seismic changes in the rule of government.
I'll give you a little history lesson, which is very interesting. The forming of the Dutch state was mostly because of farmers and fishermen and entrepreneurs. In the late 1500s, they became discontent with the overlords of their time, or their conservative party of their time, and they said, we don't want this, and they fought it off, and they formed their own country, and they became independent from Spain at that point. They were overruled by Spain.
There were Spanish tyrants ruling over them at the time.
Spanish tyrants were ruling over the Netherlands, yes. And what broke this situation then was that the Spanish king wanted to impose his religion, maybe his climate change policy of the day, onto the citizens of and they rejected it and said, no, we don't want this. And so just to bring it back to what you question, the whole state was formed by the engagement of citizens, and I think that's very much in there. Population voting showing up. It's still showing up at 70-80% of the vote for the House of Commons votes. Here it's down now to below 60, I think, the last go around. And that is a concern. If people don't really care anymore and just go off on their own way and say, okay,
Well, I mean, this is kind of a tangent, but now that we're on it, it's interesting to think about how the forming of a nation defines their sort of attitude today. Like if you think about America, for example, it's a bunch of scaredy cats who are like, screw you, I'm going out here, we're going to start our own thing, and they still kind of embody that, like, we're afraid of the old way, we're going to start our new thing.
And they don't trust the government to begin with.
We're very distrusting of this, and we're going to have our guns. And it's kind of concerning when you consider what Canada is, or what Canadian became, which is like, we're going to go over here and chill out. We're going to kind of go over here and just kind of chill out here in Canada. And a lot of the immigrants that came to Canada are like, we're going to go over here and chill out. And it's like, when it comes to our politics, it's like, I kind of just want to chill out.
Let's not make too big of a fuss. Right. And that's one thing that, I'm still coming to grips with now, especially being Dutch, being always very direct. The Canadians, come on, relax. We don't need this. So be nice. And therefore, even honking your horns is already super offensive, right?
Yeah. And speaking of that, let's play the beginning of this clip of Terry Badeau. Is that how you say it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll just play.
Yeah.
And he founded the Forum
for Democracy. Yeah.
The Forum for Democracy, which, very interesting. This man actually inspired our Mark Friesen here in Canada to start the Forum for Canadian Sovereignty, which is an organization that tries to promote an education in regards to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Because if I'm not mistaken, Terry Badeau there in the Netherlands started an organization, and then once it became popular, then he created a political party and ran candidates. But this is him, and this is a good kind of representation of the flavor of Dutch politics right here. With
in your face.
Yeah, so let's play that.
Daar zit ze, de sluipmoordenaar van de agrarische sector. Terwijl onze boeren op de rand van de afgrond staan...
Mag ik heel even?
Doet minister Schouten
Mag ik
alles
heel
aan...
even? U gaat toch deze minister sluipmoordenaar doen?
Van de agrarische sector.
Nee, dat kan niet. Neem het terug.
You can't do that. And then he doesn't take it back, right? There's some lessons in there for us.
Het is echt stuitend dat u dat zegt.
Daarvan neem ik dan kennis.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I'll take note of that. I'm not going to take it back. It's like, you can't say that. She's the assassin of the agriculture sector. You can't say that. Well, I stand by
I said it, and I'm not taking it back. Well, this is one thing that I think we're learning in our group. Is I think the playbook is to make us look like extremists, right? Jeremy talks about that too. Yeah, this is how they think they got you. Now you're an extreme. No, I'm standing up for something that I believe in that is right, and I'm not going to take it back. And I personally now I'm connecting this to being a dad. I'm protecting my kids, So no, I'm not going to take that back. Sorry.
Absolutely, and we talk about this a lot on the show, and it's about the weak, pathetic, flaccid rhetoric that comes from this so-called conservative opposition party. If you look at what the liberals talk about, they will say, "Oh, the conservatives are, they're evil, they're horrible." They'll imply the worst possible things about people who hold conservative values, like the worst. They're basically vilify and demonize us on a regular basis in this passive-aggressive way. And then what does the conservatives do? The taxes and the price of milk. Like, he wouldn't even call Trudeau to resign after the shameful Trucker Convoy, for example. The rhetoric is so weak here, and it's very inspiring to see people, Dutch politicians like this. And of course, this is why Christine Anderson became so popular in Canada, because she was able to say Trudeau is a disgrace to democracy. Spare us your presence. Yeah. Right?
Exactly.
But I was asking earlier, we kind of got sidetracked there, but I was asking earlier about how badly, dissidents get vilified and farmers get vilified. And I'm just going to bring this up. This is from the Ferryman's Toll, who brought attention to this on his Telegram. And essentially, this was during the farmer protests. Oh, look, someone placed and photographed a swastika flag at the farmers' demonstration. Yeah. Where have I seen that before? Right? Yeah. And I'm just kind of wondering, because as we know here in Canada, that flag at the convoy, the picture went everywhere. The other flag, what's the other evil flag again from the South? Anyway, the
Confederation flag.
Confederate flag. Was this flag going everywhere in the Netherlands?
No, there was just a one-off, and it could have been, a plant, right? We don't know. It's very inflammatory, by the way, in the Netherlands, even more so than here. And so, because they suffered greatly under the Nazi fascism, including my grandfather on the other side, not the farmer, but he was killed in 1945 fighting Nazism. So every family has a story like that, or a lot of them do. And So
that's that kind of stuff. That rhetoric doesn't really fly over there, then.
Well, very sensitive about it. If you start drawing parallels between now and the Second World War. Thierry Baudet did that, for example, too, in the House of Commons there, and he was right away. I think he was actually stopped from speaking for a month. Like, he was not allowed to speak anymore in Parliament because of his inflammatory.
Now that's a Twitter ban right there. Except you're getting banned from Parliament for a month. Holy crap!
Yeah. So the fight never ends, my friend. That's just basically the message that I'm getting. Like, no matter, even if we make it into Parliament, there's different things, different pushback you will get there. So.
Yeah, and it's only just the beginning. But so I'm taking away here that Mark Rutte and the VVD, one of his most powerful sort of controlled opposition tactics is this sort of like, hey, we're being reasonable here. We got to be reasonable.
Yes.
We got to take care of the environment, and that's why we're totally screwing you over and stealing your land and just ending
killing you with
a
smile. It's insidious, really, right? And it's also, as an opposition against that, it's you have to bring it up to a level and say, no, actually, you're trying to kill us. So what do you expect us to do here?
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer that, let's play this part of this speech from Eva. What's her last name?
Van Vlaardingenbroek. Oh yeah, she's quite the good-looking Dutch representatives of the farmers' protest movement.
And so she is an activist, I take it.
She's an activist. She's not affiliated with the Farmers Party, but she is. Well, she's got a law degree, I think, or a PhD in philosophy, something like that.
Yeah, I just want to play this speech from her because it kind of echoes stuff that we talk about on the show, or that I've kind of been preaching, which is we have to save ourselves. You know, like a lot of especially when it comes to these establishment parties, like they are really not going to be doing us any favors. But we'll play part of her speech here, powerful speech. I apologize, it's going to have to be more reading for you guys.
En dat is het onrecht van de ergste soort. Want onze overheid heeft zich gekeerd tegen haar eigen bevolking. Zij heeft de aanval geopend op een van de hardst werkende, meest succesvolle en bewonderenswaardige groepen van dit land. En dat zijn jullie, de boeren en burgers van Nederland. Maar daar gaat het ons kabinet niet om. Het gaat ons kabinet niet om de natuur. Het gaat ze niet om de Nederlandse bevolking. En het gaat ze niet om de boeren. Ons kabinet heeft een leugen gecreëerd om de boeren van hun land te verjagen. Alles wat jullie boeren bezitten, alles waar jullie een hele leven hard voor gewerkt hebben, zij menen dat even van jullie af te mogen pakken. En weten jullie hoe je dat soort mensen doet, dames en heren? Ordinaire dieven! Hier ter plekke met dieven gaan wij niet in onderhandeling. Wij gaan niet in onderhandeling met mensen die onze boeren hebben getreiterd, die onze boeren tot wanhoop drijven en een uitputtingsslag proberen hen ten val te brengen. En helaas, niet alleen ons kabinet, maar ook een aantal oppositiepartijen dat zegt te strijden voor de boeren, maar dat hier nu niet is, moet zich wat mij betreft schamen. Want, lieve mensen, als nu niet de tijd is om te vechten, wanneer dan wel? Als Rutte en Kaag het voor het zeggen krijgen, dan verandert Nederland in een tri-state waar Brussel... De verwoesting van ons land en onze democratie moet stoppen. Boeren van Nederland, jullie zijn de enige met de moed en...
So near the end there, she said Rutte and Cragg will turn into a tri-state. What does she mean? What does she mean by that?
Well, Rutte and Kaag is the deputy prime minister, sort of like the Freeland of the Netherlands. She actually is the leader of the DSS party, and that party is similar to the VVD, but a bit more environmentally focused. Okay. And so between the two of them, they hold the power in the Netherlands. Okay. And she is quite a globalist as well. Herself, like always advocating globalist policies.
And that reference to Belgium was the reference to the EU, the European Union?
Yeah, Brussels is where the head office for the EU is, or Strasbourg, yeah.
And is that similar to like us referring to the United Nations in a way, or is that not so much?
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah, similar. Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of parallels here. It's a great speech, actually. If you guys want to go on and check her out, I'll bring up her Twitter here in a second. But I mean, it really does come down to the people making a difference and making organizations
and engage. Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. So I thought we'd end by talking about Max Bernier riding in Portage Lisgar to bring it back to Canada. That's an actual opportunity to get a PPC person into the House of Commons. Have you been following his campaign there at all? And what are your thoughts on it?
Fantastic opportunity. Yeah, I've been working closely with Max. I've met him so many times now at the various rallies around the country, and I'm thinking seriously of going to Portage Lisgar also to help him with door knocking in June. June 19 is the election date. We've got 5 weeks, I think, to make the case in Portage Lisgar. For listeners or viewers that don't know that, the argument of us splitting the vote with the CPC and then electing a Liberal Party member doesn't hold any water. 75% of the votes last election went to either PPC or CPC. They had 50% and elected Candice Bergen, and we had 22%. And so at this point, this is a two-horse race with the campaign manager of Candice Bergen and Max. He's in his 30s, I think. Good guy, but he's definitely a corporate, party guy. So he's going to toe the line, party line, and we'll see where that ends. I think the voters of Portage Liscar are smart. They are a conservative. They like the conservative voice, the true conservative voice that Max represents. And I think there is a good chance that he connects with that and does better than the 22%. And so if that's the case, I think we can be competitive there. He just introduced yesterday the promise that if he gets elected, he will introduce new legislation related to late-term abortions. The only party conservative party that's willing to bring up this subject. And for true conservative voters in Canada, this is a big issue that basically nobody wants to talk about it because they're worried about being out-yelled by the liberal mob, right? So Max doesn't care. He just says, okay, there's certain principles you fight for, and killing late-term babies is not one thing you want to do. And we need to be able to draw a line in the sand there, and at least we can bring it up for discussion. So that's one of the things, but there's so many others. I don't have to regurgitate the PPC platform here for this audience.
No, yeah. Yeah, it is exciting to see him bring up abortion, because it has been kind of this do not touch topic for years, ever since I followed Canadian politics. Personally, I don't think it goes far enough with the legislation. I mean 24 weeks is still a pretty late abortion, but it is at least getting the conversation onto the table, yes, which I think is very exciting. And I would definitely make the argument that it's part of destroying wokeism in general. This connects to elements of the LGBTQ plus that has gone insane. You can't. Right. It's, as conservatives, we can't just question one part of it and not question another part of it. We need to kind of go to the lengths of challenging abortion, because it very much is this part of the liberal frame that we're stuck in.
Well, the liberals have gone completely off the reserve woke, in my opinion, and I think there is a backlash brewing. I don't know if you follow trends on Twitter. LGB without the T was trending yesterday. And the whole transgender discussion, I think, on June 9th, when Billboard Chris is in Ottawa, it will be brought up again, has the potential to rally common sense Canadian parents who want to protect their kids. Doesn't matter if they're conservative, liberal, or NDP. They don't want to have their, you can't drink, you can't get a driver's license until later on in your teens, but apparently you can cut off your genitals when you're in your early teens. It makes no sense, and that common sense should be translated to political power. And I think that particular subject has a lot of potential to draw in even non-conservative voters.
Yeah, and we've had Jeremy on the show many times, and he said something that I think is really is significant to where Canada is at, which is, we don't need politicians. We need crusaders. We need people who are willing to kind of get out there and tell the truth. Because I really don't think it's about just the next election. I think there's definitely an opportunity here with Max to get into the door. But when you compare it to the Netherlands, you have so many people politically engaged. You have not just one dissident party, you have a whole bunch of dissident parties. And if you compare that to Canada, it's boring. There's way less going on. There's way less engagement. And I really think that as the quality of life gets shaken up with all these globalist policies crushing down, crime rising, poverty on the rise, all of this stuff, I'm hoping that Canada is going to build character and really start to define itself in opposition to these globalist policies. That is the hope. But
Greg, my hope is, and my path to victory, even for parties like PPC in Canada, is this: culture always follows, or politics always follows culture. Okay, and that's something that we need to be aware of. We need to work hard for that reason. All the engaged people like you and I and the whole conservative groups and so many great Canadians I've met in the last 2 years who want to stand up for their kids, who want to create a good future for their kids and have the Canada that they grew up in or something similar. They need to create that good culture, and we're doing that by getting together. And you know, you had a great party there in Hamilton. You did a great job for Jeremy. And that once we do that, yeah, you got that one. I saw that. That's great.
Diagonal thing.
Yeah. But this is the path to victory. I'm telling you. In 2024, the U.S. is going to clean itself up. Okay. There's a lot of things going on there right now. I've always hoped that the whole COVID bamboozle, they're cleaning it up right now. You saw Walensky just resigned. There's more. Fauci needs to wind up in jail. And there's other things brewing like that. I think there's so much going on in the U.S. Once the U.S. cleans itself up, Canada can follow a year later. And I have great hopes for that. In the meantime, in the Netherlands, this whole farmers' protest continues to brew, potentially with a female prime minister representing the Farmers Party in March of 25. Now, our election's coming later in that year. That's how we're thinking, unless Trudeau messes it up and pulls the plug sooner. But at that point, we're set for a major shakeup here, we need to think long term. You know, the Conservative Party thinks long term. They mostly think about themselves. They think decades in advance. They don't. That's why they often don't take a position on things that are important for people. You know, did you see the Randy Hillier interview about how the Conservative Party is ultimately a mafia? You know, taking care of itself. It's not.
Of course.
It doesn't take care of the voters. It doesn't take care of the people's interests. So and we need to start thinking similar, and not give up. You know, persistent perseverance separates the amateur from the pro. So let's keep on pushing. It's the fight of good against evil, and we can do it.
That's right. And speaking of the mafia, really the globalist mafia speak in all, like I said earlier, all these fluffy terms of we have to stop climate change, we have to stop poverty. Like they make it sound like it's so great, but really what they're up to is no good. And I guess really to bring it back one more time, that clip I played of Eva, here's her Twitter, by the way, if you want to look up Eva Vlaar. You can, this is her posted speech that we watched earlier. Very good stuff. But she mentioned Rutte and Kaag and how they kind of team up to screw over the Dutch people, as it were. And I'm curious, do they essentially just all use this same sort of globalist, language? Is it that simple?
It's a playbook.
It's the same playbook, right?
Oh yeah. But it started in '74, Club of Rome, right? They decided that's what we're going to use. And as an environmental guy, I have to tell you, I'm a scientific environmental guy, an engineer. I like to use what I know about toxins, for example, and use it to my advantage. Have clean food, have clean water, have clean air. All that makes a lot of sense to me. But once environment got hijacked by greenwashers and on a subject like climate change, which makes no scientific sense, at that point I'm getting pretty upset too. You know, I don't mind building new subway systems in Canada. That's what we're doing right now. I think that's a good way of expand our public funds. It's that's a good use of public resources. But if you got to start wasting money on programs that make no sense whatsoever, only benefit a few, because that's really what it is, right? Like neo-feudalism, it's communism, benefiting a small elite that uses lies in order to extract money from people. It makes no sense. So we can fight against that.
Right. And just the one last comparison, the people who had to live through the horrible conditions of lockdowns and everything that happened with the mandates, it was despair. There was death. There was depression that has not been addressed. And these globalist politicians just act like, hey, it's climate change or it's taxes, right? And the same thing is happening in the Netherlands. Here's a clip of a very distressed Dutch farmer being interviewed.
Ik heb het van mijn vader en mijn moeder overgenomen. Ja, ik hoop van harte dat ik hier mijn oude dagen nog maar slijt en dat de kinderen doorgaan.
je daar vertrouwen in?
Nee.
I mean, how does that clip make you feel as a Dutchman yourself?
Well, in my family, my uncle also gave up farming. He did it because he didn't have a successor, and in those situations happen. But yeah, once you see an honest guy wants to just make an honest living and pass on his farm to his family, and he can't do it because some communist walks in and tells him how to live, it's not right. You know, it's to basically similar to what we would always be agitating about in the Soviet Union, right? Like, the communists moved in and confiscated the kulaks and their farms. It's wrong, and so it's wrong versus right. It's good versus evil.
Absolutely. And, you know, as more right-wing people maybe, or freedom-oriented or conservative people, sometimes, like, we're very adverse to like, you know, playing the victim or maybe getting too emotional. But I think in this situation, we need to use that as fuel at the very least. You know, we need to use our outrage, our disgust, our sadness, our righteous anger to really kind of speak up, because it's that energy of us being like, we need to stop this, versus their globalist, like they manipulate our empathy essentially and say, no, it's Mother Nature is more important than, you know, that's why we need to introduce communism, right? So that is really the kind of warring of ideas, and we really need to, you know, connect with our humanness. But we're going to wrap it up here. Any last words, René de Vries? Thank you so much for coming on the show. Anything else you wanted to say? Anything else you wanted to promote before we get going here?
Well, you can get a hold of me through my Twitter account. It was nuked twice, but I'm back at it. And that's one thing maybe I can leave you with. Markham _ PPC. Never give up, you know, and it's a long-term fight. And it's a fight for our kids and our grandkids. So
that's right.
Stay strong, connect with like-minded people. We can do this. We got this.
And as you know, guys, it is okay to demand higher standards. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next week.